We're talking to Patrick McKinnon from Poetry Harbor Press, and I was just jogging my memory here and thinking that you used to be involved with something called Poetry Motel. Is this true?
I'm still the senior editor of Poetry Motel, which is a great position because it means I get the credit, but I don't do much. Mostly I'm focusing my efforts right now with Poetry Harbor because of the regional impact that we're having. The idea behind Poetry Harbor was that as a poet I looked around and realized there wasn't any audience and that nobody was solving that problem. And so it was incumbent somehow upon the poets to solve the problem of developing audience.
So how did you do that? Tell me more.
We started creating venues up in the Duluth Superior area for poets to address an audience, figuring that what was lacking were venues. And so we started doing live performance venues, and we started doing television programming, and then we branched into publishing, and we now do a literary magazine called North Coast Review, and also do a number of books and chapbooks by regional poets, focusing on people who we think's work is vital to their community and to the community of us all at large, but for various reasons they're not in the fast track, and so they've been left go. Right? So that's sort of the idea behind Poetry Harbor, is to create as many venues as we possibly can.
So the books have been selling better now?
The books have been selling fine, yeah. Part of the reason that it all works is because we're not stuck into any one area, one single kind of venue. We use all the venues that we can come up with.
Tell me some interesting places where you've had readings.
Oh, well, I just got back from a tour that we did of the Great Lakes area, which was really a lot of fun. In fact, we started a riot in Kent State, which I always think is kind of an apropos thing to do, right? And it's a long story, but the bottom line is that there were a couple of poets who were too drunk to remember that they were 24th on the list, and so they just decided now's when I'm going to read. So they got up and started reading, and then all mayhem broke loose, and it was really quite fun. It ended up being something of a performance piece in general. But.
Tell me about some of the new titles that you've got out. I'm familiar with the Days of Obsidian.
Yeah, that's our most well-known title. This book really took off for us. It's a book of Native American poetry. It features Jim Northrup, Adrian Lewis, Denise Sweet, and Al Hunter, who are all Native American poets of substance in our region, who we have something of a working relationship with.
And of course, Jim Northrup is a Minnesotan.
Yep. And so is Al Hunter.
Adrian Lewis is not.
South Dakota.
Adrian Lewis is really notable. I think that I reviewed one of his books and described him, compared to Bukowski, I think.
He's a wild man.
He's very macho.
Well, he's wild. He calls it the way he sees it, and sometimes if you have a different vantage point and that's the way you see it, you get accused of various things rather than just being adamant about your vantage point.
Yeah.
And our newest book is a book I really love. It's called Let's Go Down to the Beach, and it's poems and translations by a wonderful poet in Stevens Point, Wisconsin named William Lawler. The translations are the interesting thing to me. He's translated in this book 4 poets from the Caribbean, 2 from Cuba and 2 from the Dominican Republic. Nicolas Guillen, who was the national poet of Cuba, and Belkis Cousa-Malay, who is still being hunted by the Castro administration in the United States. And so she surfaces and then goes under, and then resurfaces and then goes under, and then resurfaces and then goes under, because they're still trying to, I think, shut her down in many ways. The cool thing to me about Poetry Harbor, though, isn't so much that we're doing the kinds of things that we're doing in terms of publishing and television and all that, but it's that we don't represent any particular camp of poetry. We embrace an egalitarian approach to where it doesn't matter whether we as editors are particularly interested in a certain type of poetry. We're more interested in trying to engage all of the poets from all of the different schools of poetry, because it's our firm belief that there's been too much shooting of each other in the trenches among poets, and that it's time to stop shooting each other in the trenches and embrace each other and realize that we're all on the same team here, if you will, and there's plenty of things out there that we could aggress rather than spending our time aggressing on each other.
On that note, been talking to Patrick McKinnon from Poetry Harbor Press.
Thanks.
Hi, we're here with Paul Jentz, who's with RACK. You want to tell us a bit about RACK, Paul?
Well, RACK is a loose affiliation of people who are interested in putting out their literature in various forms. Book that I've written here, Inflatable Evil Thing, available through RACK, concerns itself with issues of identity, particularly the malleable nature of identity, and it's illustrated largely by the same individual will adapt any number of names throughout the course of the book, and as the identity changes of this individual, if I can even use that word anymore, the identity change is indicated by the change of the name and the character of the character themselves. Hermaphrodite in Cyberspace is a parody / satire of postmodern literary criticism, also an extension of that criticism, and I also used it as my thesis for my graduate work. And the third book here, Angie Hard As She Could, is actually a complete plagiarism. On the back it says, "This is an illegal text, to the best of my knowledge. Not one word of it is my own. It is a completely faithful act of plagiarism." And what I did was that I ran across a book of juvenile fiction from the late 40s about a typical camping trip in the Rockies, family scene, mother, father, 2 kids, and I rearranged the story. The rules of the game were that I would use only the words on the page or in a series of pages that were actually there. I could not use any of my own inventions. So essentially, by plagiarism, I suppose I mean rearranging this text, and in the course of it, finding the rather dark underside of this family. For instance, the young girl turns out to be the lesbian vampire of the bunch. This, I might add, I wrote long before lesbian vampires became all the rage in the media. So I have to say in my own defense that, I'm not on the heels of something. I'd like to think I'd played a small part. And we also do this magazine, RACK. This is issue number 1. It's the poetry of Lee Harvey Oswald, for instance, is a big part of it. It's put together by a graphic artist here in town by the name of Richard Luca, who does some fine work. He actually is the man responsible for painting the sign out front here at First Avenue many years ago. To wrap things up here, here's the second issue. It's a little bigger, and we use some aside from the text, excerpts from novels. We also use graphic art. This is a story by Steve Matushak, incidentally, who has a book out by the name of Dottaville, where Rainbows End is his selection, and that pretty much sums up RACK for now.
You're here in Minneapolis?
Yes, in Minneapolis.
Well, it's great to visit with you, and good luck with RACK.
Yes,
nice
thank
to meet
you. Thank you.
I've been right on the
So Mike, I'd like to check everybody's books out.
Hi, we're here now with Bob Gale, who's the mastermind behind this whole production and also behind Shout Magazine. And we'd like to hear a bit about both, Bob, if you will.
Well, thank you, Mary. I'm glad that you're here. First off, Shout Newspaper is a free monthly community arts newspaper for spoken word artists here in the Twin Cities, poets, storytellers, performance artists. It's distributed throughout the metro area at coffee houses, bookstores, and other venues where people can pick it up for free. It's also available on the internet as a full text version. The idea of Shout is to build and unify and to expand the spoken word community, to make spoken word a viable art form for artists to pursue as their medium of choice. This evening, we're co-sponsoring an evening featuring Lydia Lunch, who is a spoken word artist from San Francisco, who goes back probably 15, 20 years into the rock and roll history as well herself, and she's a bit of a screamer, in-your-face performance artist and poet, and we're real happy to have her here tonight. We also have several local readers with the Cacophony Chorus. We have an hour's worth of video poetry, just poets doing just like MTV, but reading their words instead of playing music. And then we also have over 20 small press book exhibitors, which is the really exciting thing that I think you're documenting here with this video. People who are really passionate about the publishing industry and about writing are here to show off their materials to each other and to network together.
What gave you the idea to bring this all together? Is it Poetry Month, or is it just...
Well, only Poetry Month, in that I felt like I had some amends to make and to really try to make a show of what spoken word and poetry can be. I've had a relationship working with First Avenue for over 2 years now, doing events here, and they came to me with Lydia Lunch was coming to town, and could I help them providing supporting activities. And so I got all press people involved, got booked the videos, and auditioned the artists and got for the local reading.
Is this the first annual?
I'm hoping that it's more than annual. In fact, I would love to see this, be a biannual or quarterly event. It really kind of depends on the audience turnout tonight and how receptive people are. So we'll all have our fingers crossed.
That's great. It's a pretty exciting place, and I think the crowds are growing by the minute, and you probably got lots of things to do to get it all set up. So thanks for finding time for us.
Thank you very much, Mary. You have a very fine evening. Thank you very much.
Hi, we're here now with Carol Robertshaw, who is the publisher of ArtWord Quarterly, a new publication that I need to know more about it. So
yes, ArtWord Quarterly has been in existence for about almost a year. We've just produced the 4th issue, the spring issue.
It's quarterly with 4 issues, and that's exactly. You got them all done. That's impressive.
Yes, so I'm pretty proud of it. It's entirely my operation. We've had wonderful submissions from all over the country. I'm looking particularly for mature writers who have a little experience under their belts, and I'm looking for poetry that has depth of experience and quality, and I've been getting it in spades. I'm delighted.
And how do you get it, Carol?
Well, I've put some ads in Poets and Writers and in Minnesota Literature in this area, and the Loft, and Writers Inc., and a few other places like that. And the word has gotten out, and it's been a real wonderful experience for me personally, who used to be in broadcasting. So I'm moving into print, and it feels very natural.
Well, certainly poetry has been in the center focus in this last month as we've been celebrating Poetry Month, and I'm sure you were feeling the effects of that.
Well, I'm delighted. I understand that it was the first year that we've ever even had Poetry Month. And I think of, Russia, which loves its poets. A poet stands up on a street corner, and it immediately draws a crowd. And I think something like that may be afoot here in the United States. And so I'm delighted to see this. I've had a good deal of success with ArtWord Quarterly, and I hope it continues.
And I noticed you're here in White Bear Lake, Minnesota.
White Bear Lake is where I publish it, but the poets come from all over the country.
Okay. Well, great, and I'm sure many people know Carol's name from her years in broadcasting, and she's well known to many listeners, and glad to hear you with a new voice and a new medium.
Thank you very much. Nice to see you again.
負けるな一茶ここにあり The stupid world, skin me mosquitoes, skin me please, skin me children. こそがえる負けるな一茶ここにあり This movie is about bug poems by a poet called Isa. A group of students from Capitol Hill chose the poems and did the backgrounds. They designed the backgrounds by how they felt about the poems. One of the things they found out was that bugs aren't that bad. We hope you learn a few things and enjoy the video. Cricket, be careful! I'm rolling over! Now listen, you watermelons. If any crooks come, turn into frogs. Time with the arrow means bugs to me. What I mean by bugs is that there are many different bugs in the world, with different sizes, shapes, and colors. The time with the arrow. And how fast?
Recently, of course, we have been doing workshops involved in this